Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano. It is the 4th of April, 2025. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So I know it's been a little while. It's been a week since the last episode. I missed Monday and Wednesday of this week just due to personal reasons there. But I am back today, and I am sitting down actually. So I no longer have a standing desk. You know, I didn't really have a standing desk to begin with. My desk is not a standing desk, so I just added some things to be able to make it or change it into a standing desk. So lift my monitor and lift my keyboard and mouse up. But it was causing me so many issues, just giving me like no space to do anything else on my desk, that it just got too frustrating. So I've removed it and I don't have a standing desk anymore. So that's why I'm sitting down, for anyone wondering, because I know I'm going to get questions about it. But hey, this is how the refuel started originally. So you can say that I'm returning to the original kind of refuel stance here. But anyway, other than that, I think, you know, it's been a fun week, right? It's been a fun week, both on the development side, a lot of stuff happening on the core development side, which I'm going to get into in a minute, and also interesting stuff, I guess is maybe not the right word, but like an appropriate word for what's been happening with the wider macro environment. We all know that there's some big tariff stuff going on in the US. No one quite knows what's going on there. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know what the effect on the market's going to be. Obviously, it has been negative to date. But yeah, there's just a lot of uncertainty right now. And I remember I spoke a lot about that back a while ago, and on a bunch of different refuels, where I said that as long as there's uncertainty, the market's just not going to like it. And of course, crypto front ran a lot of this, went down pretty hard, and then the stock market has just kind of caught up with it. You know, if you kind of look at individual stocks and even the indexes in the US, I think that yeah, it's not great, right? It's not great, and I know a lot of people are hurting right now. A lot of people aren't doing too well with their investments. But hey, investing is not easy, as I've mentioned before a lot of times to you guys before. It's not easy. But my kind of general take here, or personal take here on all of it, is that, you know, if we look further out in maybe the 10-year timeline here, because I always like to look very far out. I always like to think about the long term. Just from what I've seen over the last few months and what's been building up since, you could probably say, like, mid 2010s, so like you could say like 2015-ish sort of thing. What's been building up is that it seems like we're definitely going through a transition period in terms of like the general world order. And if I was to look 10 years out from now, I think the world's going to look very different geopolitically. I think the US is going to be a lot less relevant generally. I think that we're going to see a revitalization of Europe. I think we're going to see definite movements within Asia. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but I don't know if you guys saw, but China, South Korea, and Japan seem to be forming some sort of partnership or alliance there. So there are just things moving around. There are pieces on the board moving around in pretty substantial ways. So if I was to look 10 years out, I think that you know, that's kind of what I see. And the reason why I bring that up in relation to Ethereum is because Ethereum is a global movement, right? A global ecosystem. It is not something that's tied down to any one nation state. And we all know this. And obviously over the last year or so, there's been a big push for Ethereum to have more presence in the US. And that is happening, you know, across various different teams. You can see in this image here, that I've got in front of me that I wanted to talk about, Etherealizer's three of Etherealizer's co-founders, and someone from Paradigm here are standing in front of this building in DC. This building is probably a building that means a lot to Americans, but I actually don't know what this building is just looking at it. Americans are going to be upset at me for this, but I don't know what this actually is or what it's called, because I'm not American, obviously. But they're standing there. They're in DC. They're making moves here. But the thing is that I'm very glad that Ethereum is not tied down to the US in any real way. I'm very glad that Ethereum has a presence everywhere in the world, whether that be in Europe, whether that be in Asia or Africa, wherever it is. Ethereum definitely has a presence globally. And I think that's much better than tying ourselves down to any one nation state for various different reasons. Obviously, credible neutrality plays a big part here. And I've talked about that to death over the years on the refuel, and why that matters and why that is conductive to a long-term sustainable and healthy ecosystem. But again, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't put extra focus in areas where we feel like we're lacking. And I do think that we've been lacking in the US. But if we do take the assumption that in 10 years, the world's going to look very different, US dominance might, you know, maybe will go down. Like, I'm not saying it will or won't. I'm not a geopolitical expert, but I'm just taking in inputs and forming an opinion on them. But let's, you know, fast forward 10 years and say the US is a lot less relevant than it is today, globally speaking. Well, then that's actually really good for Ethereum, I think, because it means that Ethereum's investments in these other parts of the world were definitely the right path to take. And Ethereum as I said, is a credibly neutral global network, it means it will benefit from that and won't suffer from, I guess, like a changing world order or something that is going to lead to Ethereum becoming less relevant. I think Ethereum will become more relevant in this world. Not to say that the US isn't a relevant player and won't remain a relevant player for the foreseeable future, but I'm saying, I'm saying I think there's going to be like a rebalancing here sort of thing. There's going to be a rebalancing in power in the world, in economies in the world. And I do think that, there are people saying, well, maybe the US does this and they're better off for it in the long run. But for everything that I've seen from what's happening in the US economically with the tariffs, stuff like that, it doesn't seem very conductive to long-term success here, because there are simple things like, okay, well, we want to bring jobs in manufacturing and things like that back onto American shores, right? We want to bring it back into America so that we can have more employment, better opportunities. That's a noble goal. Like, there's nothing wrong with having that goal, but then reality hits you in the face and you kind of give a naive example about, okay, well, what does it cost to manufacture a t-shirt in the US, right? Versus in Vietnam or in China or any of these other hubs where they manufacture t-shirts, right? Or just clothing in general. Like, almost all the time, it is vastly more expensive to manufacture those things in the US. Even if you were to tariff these other countries 100%, 200%, it would still likely be more expensive to manufacture that in the US than these other countries. And at the end of the day, there's different kind of, I guess, states in the US that have vastly different economies to each other that will charge different prices for manufacturing things, so on and so forth. So I think that in a world where globalization is so prevalent and where you are trying to essentially deglobalize and basically bring everything back onshore, I just don't see how that actually ends up being positive for the only nation that wants to do that. Like, every other nation around the world, or at least every other economically relevant nation, I should say, in terms of the big economies, they aren't doing this. They're becoming just more globalized. They're becoming closer with their allies. They're forming new partnerships around the US, basically, at this point. So if you're the only one that isn't playing the game, and you think that you're going to be able to survive that, I just don't see how that works, right? Like, you're basically going up against the whole world. And yes, maybe the US today obviously is the strongest superpower right now. It has the strongest economy, but that can change and change very, very quickly. There's no guarantees to that. And if you cut off a lot of what has made your economy strong, and you cut yourself off from the rest of the world, or at least not cut yourself off completely, but make it very expensive to do business with you and very uncertain to do business with you, I just don't see how that is that more broadly leads to success for the US. I'm hoping that these things get reversed, but I don't know if they will or won't. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Trump is unreliable. His, he leads to a lot of uncertainty in the world. Really, the most certainty you can have around Trump is that he's going to be uncertain, which doesn't really mean much, but hey, it's a nice little catchy one-liner there. But I don't want to get too deep into the politics of things or into geopolitics stuff. As I said, I'm not an expert on this stuff at all, but I figured it was worth giving my take on this sorts of stuff because it does inform a lot of how I think about Ethereum long-term as well, and how I think about investments long-term too. I've been having some discussions in the Daily Gwei Discord channel with people where I essentially tell them, you need to learn to separate your investment theses from your kind of emotions and from your risk tolerance as well. Because at the end of the day, like, you can have an amazing thesis about something and you can think that something is really, really bullish, but reality will hit you in the face, and you have to protect yourself from that. You have to protect yourself from downside. So it doesn't make sense. For example, if let's just say you're extremely bullish on ETH, right? Like me, for example, extremely bullish on ETH. You're not going to put 100% of your net worth into ETH if you're caring about risk tolerance here, if you're caring about making sure that you weather all of the kind of storms that can come to you in the investing world from any number of directions. Like, we never know what's going to happen in the world, right? So, like, as you guys know, I've never been 100% ETH. I've always diversified into various different things. I've been heavy ETH, and I still am heavy ETH, but I've always diversified into various different things because as much as I believe in ETH and as bullish as I am on ETH, there are a million different factors that can affect that over the short to medium and even long term. And one of those big factors have been the tariff stuff, right? That's obviously negatively affected all of crypto, including ETH here. So if we think more broadly about it, well, you could say that, well, if you thought that this was going to negatively affect the markets, you'd be sitting in cash instead of in stocks and crypto. Maybe you're like 50% crypto and stocks and 50% cash or something like that, right? And it's not actually that bad to be sitting in cash right now, given that you can get a pretty good yield on cash because rates are still high. And that's another thing. What if you thought to yourself, well, you could think like a year ago even, or a couple of years ago, well, crypto has always existed in an easy money regime. regime? What happens when there's a prolonged hard money regime? Will crypto do well in that environment? Which cryptocurrencies will do well in that environment? Will it be BTC only? Will it be ETH? Will it be something else? And all these questions just lead to the fact that it is very hard to invest in these sorts of things. And that's something that I've been trying to get through to people for years now, that it's just very, very difficult. And at the end of the day, like, as much as people want to blame others for, for giving them the wrong information, or for being too bullish, or for influencing them, at the end of the day, guys, like, people have to take personal responsibility. No one's forcing you to do these things. Unless they're holding a gun to your head and forcing you to do this, which is not happening, right? No one is forcing you to do these things. It's your own personal responsibility to manage your own risk and manage your own investment decisions here. And I think that's what's caused a lot of people grief over the last 6 to 12 months, especially 6 months, especially, is that you want to be able to obviously make money in the market, and you want to, you're happy taking all this risk when the market goes up. But the problem is that if you only think about the fact that, okay, well, I'm taking all this risk while the market's going up, and it'll be fine because everything's bullish now. Trump won the election. We're going to have better stuff going on in the US with regards to crypto regulations. And you ignore the other stuff that was going on, such as the rates still being high, such as the tariff stuff, such as the uncertainty. Well, then your investment thesis was simply wrong. Like, yes, it's positive that we have better crypto regulations in the US now, or at least we have a friendly SEC and so on and so forth. But as I've said before, that's not going to defeat the global macro uncertainty that has been caused now by the tariffs and the fact that the rates are still relatively high. I mean, they're still quite high compared to what they were even, a couple of years ago, right? Or 3 years ago now, or something like that. They were like rock bottom. And for a very long time, they were like that. And now they're relatively quite high, and it's very persistent. No one knows when they're going to start coming down rapidly again. No one really knows from here what's going to go on. You can make your own educated guesses. But yeah. So I've spoken to a lot of people about this, both close friends and just general kind of acquaintances on this. And the one thing, I'll end this here because I know I've ranted on about this for a little while here, but the one thing and the one theme that I always get is that people thought that they knew what was going to happen. They had this really strong thesis and they believed in it so much that they thought it was going to be like 100% certain to happen. And then they just get punched in the face by reality and they don't know what to do. There's like an indecision there. They're like, do I cut my losses or do I hold and wait until things go back up and then I sell? Is there going to be a bounce and then I'll sell into that? So on and so forth. And that right there, guys, that right there is the hardest part of investing. Buying something is easy. Holding it and then choosing when to sell it is hard, right? Honestly, I think buying is the easiest part of investing because if you like something, if you have a thesis on it, if you think it's going to do well, you buy. But then as you keep holding it, right, it becomes harder to hold based on various different reasons, or it becomes easier to hold based on various different reasons. Then, if you're holding it for the long term, multiple years, you start second guessing things as time goes on. You're like, should I sell now? Oh, well, I was up this much, but now I'm only up this much, or I'm down this much, but hey, if it goes back up, and I sell now, it's bad, right? There's all these different things that lead to indecisions, and that's what I've noticed is a common theme across a lot of people that I speak to, and that is exactly why things can be so difficult here. But yeah, anyway, enough ending my little rant there. As I mentioned during the rant, there was this image here posted by Etherealize with 3 of their co-founders, Grant Hummer, from left to right, Grant Hummer, Danny Rhyme, and Vivek on the far right there. The guy, a third from the left, works at Paradigm. His name is Alexander Grieve. I think I've covered a bunch of his threads before, but he's the VP of Government Affairs at Paradigm. So he's the one who handles a lot of the government-related stuff within Paradigm. And as you guys probably know, Paradigm is one of the biggest VCs in crypto. They do a lot of the Ethereum ecosystem. They fund or at least their CTO, Georgios, works on Reth. So they essentially fund an execution layer client for Ethereum. So a lot of stuff going on there. But it was just great to see this because I think that, as I said during my little rant there, it's important for Ethereum to have a presence in the US, but I'm glad Ethereum has a presence outside of the US as well and isn't just focused solely on the US here. And from what I'm hearing as well from the Etherealize guys, they are making good progress there. They are only interested in talking about and announcing stuff publicly when they've actually got concrete stuff to talk about. They're not interested in the rumor mill. They're not interested in stoking the fires of speculation or giving people hopium. They just want to target the people that they need to target, produce real results, and then relay those sorts of things and relay those results to the wider ecosystem once there's actually something to relay there. So I just thought that was a really cool picture there. You can check it out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, moving on to all of those core dev updates I was talking about, and there are a lot. But first off, I want to say that the Petra mainnet date has been moved by a week. So it was scheduled for April 30th, now it is scheduled for May 7th. This shouldn't really come as a shock to anyone, given that there was a lot of discussions around this on Twitter, Daily Gwei Discord channel, ETH R&D Discord channel, about the fact that core devs wanted a little bit more time to let things bake, let things test, and a week delay, I guess you could call it, isn't a big deal at all. So instead of April 30th, it's May 7th now. I believe there's going to be a live stream. Hopefully, I'll be able to be on that stream as long as it's not like 4 a.m. my time or something like that. It probably is going to be that, but we'll have to see. I'll definitely try to make the live stream there, but I did want to address something with regards to timelines again. You can see some of these comments here. People say, only 6 weeks late, new record for Ethereum devs, or for core devs every single time. Like, these kind of comments are just dumb for multiple reasons, and I think people who make these comments should be honestly embarrassed when they make these comments, given that the fact that you say something like only 6 weeks late. 6 weeks late for what? There was never a date given until the last All Core Devs call, which was April 30th, and now we've had a 1 week delay to May 7th. But before that, there were only estimates given. There was no hard date given here, and we had delays due to the fact that the testnets didn't go as planned. So the thing is that there weren't delays due to things not being developed fast enough or things not being done fast enough. It was due to actual issues that we saw. So, I feel like these comments are just really, really silly. And at the same time, as you guys know, it's not like this upgrade is critical. It's not like if we don't get this upgrade tomorrow, the network's going to fall over. Or if we do get it tomorrow, the network's going to go 100x. No, that's not what's happening at all. Yes, there's a blob count increase coming with that. That's something that we definitely need. Yes, there are a bunch of other EIPs coming with that are going to be really, really cool. But we're currently in a period of a very bearish market, right? There's not that much activity going on right now. It's not like delivering this on April 30th versus May 7th is going to make a difference at all. It's going to make zero difference in my mind here. So I think when people say these things, I don't know, it maybe stems from the fact that they're holding ETH and ETH hasn't gone up and they're probably mad. So instead of blaming themselves for it, they're going to blame someone else, which is another thing that I didn't rant about earlier. But it's another thing that really annoys me is when you make your own investment decisions and then when they don't go the way that you think they were going to go, you start blaming everyone else. No, that's not on. You should not be doing that. You should be blaming one person and one person only, and that's yourself. You're the only one that is responsible for your investment decisions. If you fall for a scam, I'm sorry, that's on you. Yes, the scammers are pieces of shit too, but that's on you. By blaming everyone else except yourself, all you're doing is setting yourself up to once again make that same mistake. The only way you learn from your mistakes is by admitting that you made a mistake, right? By offloading the blame to someone else, you're not learning from your mistake. And I've seen this time and time again with people. They blame everyone else, then things keep getting worse for them because they're blaming other people instead of themselves, and they just fall into this deep spiral of just shit, basically. So yeah, a little bit of, I guess, life advice, not just crypto advice there, of just to own your mistakes, guys. Definitely something that we should all be better at doing. But yeah, anyway, that's the movement of the Petra mainnet date there. As I said, only a week and not really a big deal generally. But onto more interesting all core devs news or I guess like core development news. Tim Byko put together a really great Twitter thread here explaining how going forward there's going to be a reconfiguration of the all core devs process. And he says here, to deliver on Ethereum's ambitious L1 roadmap, we should decouple planning and execution. To that end, I'm proposing we reorient all core devs to focus on scoping future forks and elevate our existing testing calls as the main venue for the current ones. And then he gives a thread on this, which I'll link in the YouTube description below, talking about this. But the TLDR is basically that we have a lot of calls in the Ethereum core development kind of ecosystem right now, and it doesn't really make much sense for everything to happen on the all core devs call anymore. It makes sense to break this off to make sure that we have these existing testing calls focusing on what they do well, and then have the all core devs call focusing on what it does well, such as scoping out future forks. And this will hopefully lead to a better and faster development process for the core protocol here. And this is something that I've been talking about the last few months, this theme of basically reprioritizing. This is part of that, reprioritizing things, making sure that we can deliver on the roadmap faster, better, hopefully we can deliver it before the end of the decade, because as I've said before, the roadmap that was given in 2020 is a decade-long roadmap, but that was at the time. Maybe in the next 3 years we can deliver all of this, so we do it 2 years sooner, but it does heavily depend on coordination. It's very important to make sure that we have proper coordination here, because we can't throw more money at this. We can't throw more people at it. That would unironically, or ironically, I should say, slow down the process, actually. So what will speed up the process is by reorienting things and reprioritizing things, which is what Tim Biko has talked about. And you can check out his thread in the YouTube description below to get more information about this. And another thing that he mentioned as well was he quote tweeted a call that was had by Ethereum protocol researchers. So this was the first protocol research call hosted by Barnaby and Ansgar from the Ethereum Foundation. And they were talking on this call. This is the first call. The main topic was about the future role of home nodes on the network. And Tim Biko quote tweeted this with a nice little table here that distills down the short to medium term R&D priorities of Ethereum, which was made by Ansgar here. So you can see, looking at the roadmap themes in the short to medium term at both the consensus layer and execution layer, what the priorities are. So in the consensus layer for the short term, the main priority is blob throughput. We knew that. That's not that's not shocking to anyone. Blobs. We need more of those, right? And then on the short term execution layer side of things is execution throughput, such as raising the gas limit and other such things that can make the throughput of the execution layer on layer 1 be better. And that could actually be upstream to L2s as well, at least EVM compatible L2s. Now, for the medium term, what is the consensus layer focusing on? Well, it's the Beam chain, right? Which is codenamed Proof of Stake version 2. You guys know all about the Beam chain at this point. There's separate calls for that. There's a separate website for that, which I showcased on one of the refuels. That's making progress. That's happening. But that is more of a kind of medium term thing here. And then in the execution layer side of things for the medium term, we have ZK EVM and native rollups, which we all know about. People have been talking about this to death at this point, but those are the priorities there. And again, this goes back to what I've been saying about reprioritization and prioritizing the right things. I think we are prioritizing the right things now for the short to medium term. I actually agree with all of this. I know there's been a bit of discussions recently around blobs in particular, around the fact that do we really need to scale up blobs even more, given that the fact that today they're not really in so much demand that they're generating that much fee revenue for Ethereum. If we scale up to 64 blobs or whatever it is by the end of the year, that's going to be way too many. We're going to have empty blobs again, so on and so forth. But I come back to what I've said in the past, where it's basically like, well, the problem is that traditionally, we've always hit this kind of like scalability wall, because instead of scaling, we essentially waited until demand hit the ceiling, and then it takes a long time to scale from there. For example, let's just say that we start seeing fees on L2s go up a lot because blobs are in really high demand and fees are going up. And let's just say that stays that way for 6 months. Is that going to be a good user experience? Is that going to be a good way to onboard users? No, it's not. And then if we have to wait 6 months for a blob throughput increase because it's part of a fork, in that world, it's actually worse off than us providing kind of extra blobs when things are slow, and then making sure that we can meet that demand. Now, when it comes. Now, of course, there's other, I guess, like discussions around, well, let's give validators the ability to change the blob limit or change how many blobs they want to process. Well, on the surface, this is a good idea. If you actually dig a little bit deeper, you start to run into issues with this. And one of the issues, and the biggest issue I would argue, is around coordination. You guys saw how long it took to coordinate an L1 gas limit increase from 30 to 36 million, right? It took months to do that. And it took a really big push from everyone to do that. Now, imagine we do a push to increase the blob throughput, and we have to basically contact all the validators to do this. Like, imagine that takes even a month. It's just too slow, right? Like, or 2 months or 3 months. It's just too slow. So I think that the better way forward here is to deliver these blob throughput increases, deliver things like PeerDAS when they're ready, and then make sure that we can fill those things up by building better applications, by creating more demand for the Ethereum ecosystem. Because this is something that I think a lot of people miss, is that you can constrict supply as much as you want, but if demand isn't either matching that supply or exceeding it, then it doesn't really matter, does it? And I think we can look at something else that isn't obviously directly related to this, but something else to actually make this point here. Let's look at ETH as an asset and what has happened to ETH as an asset against Bitcoin since the merge. So the merge was a massive reduction in the ETH supply, right? It was a 90% reduction in the ETH issuance, in new ETH issuance. And then on top of that, we had EIP 1559 go live, which made ETH net deflationary for a while. It's not net deflationary anymore since the merge, but it was for a while there. But what happened to ETH against BTC? It went down, right? It's gone down only for a long time now. What happened to ETH against USD? Well, it didn't go as high as we thought it would go. It kept hitting 4K, kept selling off of that, and essentially we didn't get to a new all-time high. So even at like negative issuance for ETH, we still didn't see a strong ETH asset. And that is not because we were issuing too much ETH, obviously. It was because there wasn't enough demand there for ETH as an asset. For whatever reason, you can come up with a million different reasons for this, but for whatever reason, the demand wasn't matching. So it doesn't matter how good our supply dynamics were or how low our supply was, our new supply was, the demand wasn't there to match it. Then look at something like Solana, for example, right? The Sol inflation rate for a long time now has been really high. Like, I think it's like 7 to 10% or something like that over the last few years. And yet Sol went up a lot. Why? Because Sol had a lot of demand from the meme coin mania, because you needed Sol to speculate on meme coins. Now, obviously, since meme coins have washed out, so has the Sol demand, and the Sol price has followed with it. It fell from like a 290 to whatever it is today, 120 or whatever it is, right? It's fallen a lot, right? So again, my point here is not to like pick on any one particular thing, except to give to make you guys realize that it's all about demand, whether that be at the application level, whether that be at the asset level. It's all about demand. So it doesn't matter if supply is low or high or whatever. We need to increase demand no matter what world we're living in. We need to increase demand today. We need to increase demand in a year, 2 years, whatever it is. How do we do that? Well, you build better applications. You onboard more people. You make it easier to use this stuff. You give people reasons to use this stuff, right? And Ethereum today, by far, has, I think, the most reasons to use a chain beyond even just like pure speculation. There's so many different things you can do on Ethereum. Obviously, most stablecoins live on Ethereum. People do a lot of stablecoin stuff on there, stablecoin payments, stuff like that. But so much of it is still so difficult for people to use. And we're getting better as time goes on. But again, it comes back to what I'm saying is you increase demand. That's how you increase the value of ETH, is basically making ETH more in demand by increasing demand for applications and using ETH obviously within those applications. And that's how fee revenue comes as well there. So that's my, I guess, thoughts on that topic that I've seen discussed. But I just realized I'm almost at 30 minutes. I'm not even halfway through what I wanted to get through today, but this is because I missed the last week of refuels. But anyway, moving on from that to something from Barnaby here, which was a post that he put on ETH Research called Paths to Single Slot Finality Revisited. Now, as you guys know, there's a lot of discussions around obviously lowering the finality on the Ethereum network from the current, 12.5 or 13.5 minutes to a single slot or 3-slot finality. So if it was a single slot finality and the slot time was 12 seconds, it would be a 12-second finality. If it was 4 seconds, it'd be 4 seconds. With 3-slot finality and a 4-second slot time, it would be 12 seconds. So you could say 4 to 12 seconds is what the aim is here. Now, this is a really detailed post about basically how everything plays with this and how everything plays with single slot finality across the network. So you can go give this a read. I'll link in the YouTube description below. But there was a nice graphic that basically summarizes what Barnaby posted here, which you can check out. Again, I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But essentially, he looked at what does the future look like under 2 different scenarios. So if we look at today in terms of staking, the minimum balance to be a solo staker, or the minimum stake required, is 32 ETH, right? You can have up to 4 million validators with 32 ETH and all participate once every epoch, which is 6.4 minutes. But if you have a capped validator set, which is some of the proposals that have been going on, this could lead to an easy single slot finality, because essentially you would have a min EB of greater than 32 ETH. So let's say that it would require 100 ETH instead of 32 ETH to be a validator on the network. You would have only the top 4, 8, or 16,000 validators active at a time, all participate once every slot, which is 4 seconds, and you have a heavy fossil as part of it. So you have heavy fossil, which is the inclusion lists EIP for improved censorship resistance on the network. So this is what he's calling easy single slot finality, where essentially what you're doing is you're limiting the amount of validators on the network because you're limiting participation here, but you get finality much easier. But then there is orbit staking, which has been talked about a little bit, and sometimes referred to, I believe, as rainbow staking as well. So what if we had a minimum effective balance or a minimum required ETH stake of less than 32 ETH, maybe something like 4 ETH? Well, that means that we would have more than 4 million validators active at a given time. So we would have big validator votes often, with small validators having less votes less often, with heavy fossil again. These both lead to the same kind of outcome of light fossil, which is permissionless light includers, and all ETH can be delegated. So there are different paths here to how we approach finality, or single slot finality, I should say, with regards to how many validators we want to have live on the network. I'm a bigger fan, honestly, of having less validators on the network. Maybe not in the path that Barnaby outlined in this conclusion here. Maybe in the path of the fact that essentially you have way less validators because of the fact that you have more ETH being able to be staked on a validator, with Max EB obviously going live with Impectra. But it was an interesting read nonetheless. You can go check it out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, something else here from Will, who works in Ethereum research. So he's been involved with a bunch of different efforts since he joined the Ethereum Foundation about a month ago, in order to map out what the Ethereum Foundation kind of looks like. And you can see that he's got a nice little graphic here of what he's been able to put together so far. You can see that he's bucketed this into different categories, where he's got the protocol research and development, or PR&D, of the EF is broken up into the Ethereum Foundation research, which you've got here. There's a bunch of different teams, such as research operations, consensus R&D, and so forth. And then underneath that, you've got teams that are part of the protocol research and development, but aren't part of this kind of foundation research here. So they're part of the development stuff, whether that be as Geth, obviously the execution layer client here, or ETH Panda Ops on the operations side, and so on and so forth. Then you have ecosystem development on the right hand side, such as things like DevCon, education, grants, and so on and so forth. And then ops generally, such as people ops, legal, DevOps, and so on and so forth. So you can go check out this graphic. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But it's great to see that the Ethereum Foundation has been mapped out mostly here. I think there's probably a bit more to add here, but this is mostly what the Ethereum Foundation looks like today. So if you are interested in what the Ethereum Foundation does from a deeper level, you should go check out this graphic. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so we had a nice little release, when was this? March 29th, so a few days ago now, called ESPLR, which is a local ETH block explorer. So essentially, we are all very reliant on Etherscan today. Nothing wrong with Etherscan. Etherscan's amazing. It has a lot of different features, but obviously, Etherscan is not trustless, right? So that's where this comes in, where essentially it's a local block explorer. You can run locally on your own machine. You can talk to your own full node, and you can essentially make it so that you don't have to trust any third party when looking up details about your Ethereum addresses. Now, of course, this local ETH block explorer is not going to have all of the features that Etherscan has. Maybe in the future it will. You know, obviously we don't know, but it's great that this exists, because there is another one called Autoscan. I don't know what the status of that is. I don't know if it's still live. I think it is. But these things, we need more than one, obviously. And these things are critically important, because Etherscan can be hijacked and show you the wrong information. It's something that I don't think a lot of people have thought about before, but it can definitely happen. And yeah, maybe it's not like a huge critical issue that I guess, like, if it was to happen, because people would very quickly clue in that it is happening. But at the same time, you still need to be able to have a fallback as well, like in case something happens to Etherscan or one of the other ETH block explorers. And at the same time, if you have your own full node and you're running your own full node and you're using it as an RPC for your own transactions, that's only halfway there. You need to be able to actually read the chain. Now, without a GUI on top of it, you have to basically learn how to use the command line, learn all these different commands in order to find out this information. Well, what this does is essentially makes it so you don't have to do that. You can just paste in your Ethereum address like you would normally on Etherscan, or paste in transaction hashes and be able to see things like balances, whether that be ETH or stablecoins or whatever other tokens you have, and be able to use the data from your own full node to see this. So there's no need to trust anyone. This is the holy grail of full trustlessness. You don't have to trust any third parties here, which I think is quite cool. I haven't had a chance to run this myself locally, but I definitely will check it out when I get time. But you should go check it out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, another release that happened a few days ago was the mainnet launch of privacy pools. So ETH users can now achieve on-chain privacy while still dissociating from illicit funds. So it's now up to us to make privacy normal again. So I think I've covered privacy pools before, or at least the concept of privacy pools before. So you can deposit up to 1 ETH in there, and if your funds pass the wallet screening that privacy pools has in place, they can withdrawn privately. They can be withdrawn privately, and if the funds aren't approved, you can still withdraw back to your original wallet, making privacy pools a non-custodial system. Now, I think I mentioned this last time I discussed this, but I kind of take issue with the term illicit funds, right? Because different nation states and different governments have different views on what illicit funds are. Like, for example, funds moving from a country to another country, and maybe those countries don't get along, maybe they're under more scrutiny than funds moving between allies, for example. And maybe things get targeted and marked as illicit because of political reasons, or because they want to send a message, or because they want to they want to kind of make an example out of someone. And what does privacy pools use as their kind of, I guess, whitelist here? Like, do they use every government's illicit funds kind of tracker here? Do they just rely on public input, for example? Maybe they do detail it. I'm not sure. I haven't kind of read anything about this here, but I still think it's cool that this exists, because it means that you basically have plausible deniability, and you can say, well, my funds weren't mixed with any other kind of illicit funds if you were to speak to some government, and here I can prove it. But at the same time, like, maybe you prove it to one government, but what about another government that thinks differently, right? So I think that true privacy only works when it's credibly neutral, when it's just neutral in general. I don't think you can achieve like true privacy when you have things like whitelists in place, where you have things like mark kind of illicit funds and stuff like that. I understand why it needs to exist, or at least why people think it needs to exist, but I don't know. The cypherpunk within me just doesn't think it works, both based on obviously my values and beliefs, but also based on just reality, really. But still, I'm happy to see this go live. I'm curious to see how many people use it. Versus something like Tornado Cash, now that Tornado Cash is off the sanctions list. As I said last time, I don't know if you're legally able to use it right now, but I'm sure it will be in the near future. But yeah, it's always good to see more privacy solutions coming online on Ethereum mainnet. So you can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so as you guys know, Josh Rudolph here is in charge of, or at least leading the effort for L2 interoperability across various different ecosystem partners here. So they had another interoperability working group call, I believe this was yesterday, where they discussed a bunch of different things. The TLDR is in this image here, but I just figured it was worth highlighting again, because even though there's a lot of noise going on right now, there's a lot of discussions around different things happening right now, both within crypto and in the wider world, L2 interoperability has not stopped, right? We haven't stopped working on it. We haven't stopped developing it. It's definitely something that we are going to be focusing on for the foreseeable future. And it's definitely something that is trying to be solved within the next, 6 months even from now, and make sure that it's really easy for users to basically interact with multiple L2s across the Ethereum ecosystem. So yeah, you can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, last up, just wanted to highlight this thread from the GrowThePie team. So the GrowThePie website now provides weekly engagement metrics for the whole Ethereum ecosystem, with more Ethereum mainnet inclusion included in this. So you can go to their website and check this out for yourself. But I'll showcase it on the refuel right now for you. But there was a couple of different things I wanted to talk about with regards to this. First off is just kudos on GrowThePie for providing more data for the Ethereum ecosystem, more on-chain data. They're really one of the only teams that I trust to actually have the accurate data here. So I'm really, really glad to see that they're continuing on with this and providing more and more stuff here. But the second thing I wanted to discuss was around the metrics themselves. Because as you guys have probably seen, people on crypto Twitter especially love to FUD Ethereum and say, Ethereum is at its kind of limit here. Oh, my light just went out on my on my camera there. Oh, it's back. People love to say that Ethereum is at its limit, and Ethereum can't process more transactions, and Ethereum is in decline because they're only looking at L1. Now, I'll give you a TLDR on how this works. There's the Ethereum L1 gas limit, right? 36 million as it stands today. That means that there's only a certain number of transactions that can fit in a block, right? In each block. That means there quite literally is a ceiling onto how many transactions can happen on the chain each day, each week, whatever it is, until the gas limit is changed. So if you look at it from that lens, because the gas limit is at its limit, and because we still have even though the L1 fee is relatively low, we still have contention. The fees are still high, right? The fees are still still higher than they would be if we didn't have a full block, which would be zero, right? So, or near zero, not exactly zero, but very, very cheap here. And then what these people will do is not only will they FUD Ethereum by only looking at L1 and saying that, but of course they won't include the L2 metrics. They won't include all the growth happening on L2s. And then of course they'll when they're hit with, well, why didn't you include the L2s? They'll say, well, the L2s aren't Ethereum. And it's like, okay, well, even if you believe that, at least be intellectually honest about the fact that the only reason why the number of transactions on the Ethereum L1 is not going up is because it's at its limit. Like, that's not how you measure L1 activity because of that. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. Now, I'm glad that websites like GrowThePie exist, as I said, because it gives us a more detailed breakdown of not just mainnet, but L2s as well. But the problem with this data is not the data itself, it's the people. The people looking at this data and not being able to interpret it correctly and misunderstanding it and then spreading this FUD, which obviously gets us all riled up and gets us all upset here. Now, one last thing I'll say on this data as well is that people will often point to this chart and this Ethereum weekly engagement chart and say, well, you know, across L1 and L2s, we have 10 million active addresses. That means we have 10 million users. No, guys. Like I've said this so many times before. An address does not equal a user. I use at least 10 different addresses a week myself, right? Just my, and I wouldn't even consider myself to be a power user. I consider the power users to be like things like MEV bots and stuff like that, right? I consider myself to be an enthusiast user. I'm using 10 different addresses for various different reasons. I swear it makes sense, but I'm not going to tell you why because it'll just dox me completely and all my privacy related stuff. But just like if you just take that as truth, which it is, I'm not lying to you, it is truth that I use 10 different addresses a week for various different things, then like it stands to reason that this number is incredibly inflated if you talk about how many regular people are here. So no, there's not 10 million active users of Ethereum, including L1 and L2s. I would argue, based on the data that I've seen and and based on a bunch of other heuristics and measurements that and kind of inputs that I've taken in, I would argue that at most there's a few 100,000 active users of anything on chain. This includes other chains as well, not just Ethereum L1 and L2, but other L1s as well here. And that is because there is just not that much stuff to do on chain when things aren't bullish, right? Most of this ecosystem or most of the on-chain stuff is based on speculation. When things are going down, obviously there's less speculation, less excitement, less volume, less liquidity, less activity. When things are going up, when things are bullish, the reverse is true. So if you take it from that lens, you can see and you can know that we just don't have those users there. And then there are different types of users too. Like for example, let's just say a game was to launch on an L2 and it has 100,000 players. Well, okay, you could say that we have 100,000 new users, but those people playing that game, how much activity are they actually bringing to the network? Are all of their transactions fully on-chain, or is only a batch of them on-chain? How much fees are they paying? Is it spam? Like so on and so forth. So you can't just look at the raw data and draw any conclusions from it. You have to unpack it. You have to put all these asterisks on it, and you have to understand that it's not even equal between networks. Like Ethereum L1 versus L2s versus other L1s, they're all different. They all measure activity differently. What is quite uniform but still has differences is fee revenue, but the only reason why the major reason why it has so much differences is because of MEV, because people will say, well, MEV is fee revenue and we should include that. It's like, yes, it is, but like it's toxic fee revenue and it's unsustainable. And we've already seen this happen on Ethereum L1 and now with Solana as well. They had high fees and now it dropped a lot because MEV on that chain went away because speculation went away. MEV is higher when activity is higher. So there's just so many different nuances here, guys. And I don't expect people to understand this if they're new to the ecosystem. I don't expect them to understand this even if they're experienced with the ecosystem. But what I do expect is that if you start posting shit on crypto Twitter and you start trying to post an analysis on crypto Twitter, you at least understand what the hell you're talking about. Because all you're doing if you're posting and not understanding is spreading FUD, spreading bullshit, you're causing confusion, and that is not good for anyone in my opinion there. But anyway, on that little rant, I'm going to end it there for today. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all hopefully on Monday. Thanks everyone.